Welcome to the Pot of Gold podcast, where we talk about finances, wealth generation, and real estate investing. Today on the show, I have Peter Fife, who is actually a high school friend that I recently reconnected with. Apparently, he has a multifamily real estate investment company known as Fife Ventures. How are you doing today, Peter?
Doing really well, Nathaniel. Good to see you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on the show. This is kind of exciting. Like I said, we went to high school together all the way back in 2000, I'd say 2005 to 2007.
Good times.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's been quite a while, man. But
Yeah, we used to spend a lot of time doing a lot of stuff together. It was fun. Good
yeah,
times.
definitely. I miss our chess sessions.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. I talked to my wife about that recently, and one of my favorite memories for sure.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of good memories from that. Although I don't know if I have them all with my head injury and everything. I do know that there's some holes there. I had to
Yeah.
relearn math and everything, but the things that are there are definitely good. So all good
Yeah,
things.
good.
So, yeah.
That's good. For me too. So they were good. So
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Well, I'd like you to kind of give us an introduction about yourself, some background, exactly what happened that caused you to get into multifamily investing, and what that looks like for you today.
yeah, so I went to BYU. I wanted to be a lawyer. Ended up taking the LSAT several times, and with the ultimate goal of getting into the BYU Law School because that was a school that I could afford. Ended up not getting accepted to BYU. I was accepted to several other schools, but not BYU. And since I wasn't able to afford them, I needed a quick job to kind of. I just gotten married to pay the rent and to keep food on the table. So I got a job at a local company where I was just staffing and I was recruiting people. And that was never the end goal. And so I'd been at that job for 3 or 4 years. Uh, yeah, 4 years, and realized that it was not what I wanted to do. But I was quickly slipping into that mode where this is what I was going to do unless I made a change. So um, I came home to my wife about 2 months before our first baby was born, and she was very familiar with the fact that I wasn't very happy at work, and we'd seriously discussed the possibility of quitting and trying to start a business. Really didn't have any idea what my business would be, but we decided it was better to start a business with a kid that's 2 months away than down the road when we've got 2 or 3 or 4 kids. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
quit
that
my
makes
job and
sense,
started.
doesn't it?
Hmm.
Less on your
Yeah,
plate. So
yeah. So that's how I got started. I ended up flipping a home because that was not the idea was not to do flipping. Was to not to do real estate. It was just the best way that I knew how to make money. So I bought a house with my brother. We worked on it till midnight every day for about a year. It took us forever. We'd never done anything construction related. Worked on it for about a year, sold it, and we each made 100,000. And that was kind of the beginning of my real estate journey.
that's a
So there's
pretty
been a
good
lot of
spread
other
for your
houses since
first
then.
deal, huh?
Yeah. Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah. It was
Now,
a
is this with
triplex.
who is
Go
this
ahead.
with? Is this John, Paul,
This is with Joseph, my second
Joseph, your
oldest
younger
brother.
brother?
Well,
Okay.
so yeah, and so he and I worked, and it was a triplex in American Fork that the city was going to condemn. So we got it
Oh,
for really
gotcha.
cheap. Yeah, the walls were all brown. We thought they were painted brown. Turned out it was nicotine.
Ooh.
Uh, there were buckets of dead rats. Literally buckets. They had like little traps on the top of the 5 gallon bucket where the rat would try to cross, and they would spin and it would drop in. We had buckets of. It was
Gotcha.
an
I've seen
absolutely
stuff like
disgusting
that.
place. Yeah, they work. Absolutely disgusting property. But yeah, so we were there for a year working on that. Made it really nice and made some good money.
So I imagine there were like holding costs and stuff that were involved with that. How did you get the money to manage all of that?
Yeah, so there were for us at the time very significant holding costs. My wife and I we've always lived very, very frugally. I think that's kind of the first step in anything that you do is to live. For us, we lived well below our means. So she was working at the time, and so we had decided when we got married that we would live off of about $40,000, and her salary was 70,000, and so that left us with $30,000 to to invest. And so that covered the down payment, and then the money that she made throughout the process covered the payment of the mortgage.
Okay. So basically you're using that W-2 job that she had as kind of the leverage to make sure that the other costs were taken care of so that you can turn around and make a profit.
Exactly. And we didn't know that there were things as hard money. We didn't know that there were such things as hard money lenders or gator lending or any of these other methods of securing money for an earnest money or for a down payment. For us, we just thought we went about it very traditionally, which was 20% down, which was a lot for us. That had taken us like 3 years to save up for. Thankfully, we had saved it. And so we were able to get started with that.
And so you started with the single family home. You made $100,000 each. And then you took that $100,000, you turned around and started another project, or
yes,
the next step there?
So I'd been told about something called a 1031 exchange.
Okay, yeah,
where you're able to, you're able to flip, just for your listeners if they're not familiar with it, but you're able to flip money that comes from one investment into a like kind investment. So in real estate, you're able to flip it into another real estate property, typically multifamily to multifamily, or really just real estate investment to investment. So I flipped that into a home in Spanish Fork because I didn't want to pay taxes on that $100,000 that I made. So that was the down payment and the money I needed to renovate that Spanish Fork home. And I did that one by myself. So from then on, I was by myself.
Okay.
So.
Now, did you run into any kind of hiccups or problems that like kind of put things on the back burner for a bit? Did you like?
Oh, Nathaniel, where to start? Okay, so maybe this will be a good story. So when my brother and I first bought the triplex, my brother and I have never done anything construction-wise ever. We're from a farm. We've worked with cows. We've changed pipe, and we've bucked hay. Like that's what we've done. I've never installed the toilet before. I've never done any plumbing. So my brother and I walk into this house that is close to being condemned. So it is a terrible house, and we're sitting there kind of knocking on walls, trying to like pretend to each other that like, oh, this needs to be fixed. Then after about 2 or 3 minutes, after about 2 or 3 minutes of this BS, we both looked at each other and we were like, what the crap are we doing? Like, oh my gosh, we can't fix this place. This is nuts. And so we spent easily, each of us, about 1,000 hours on YouTube. Like literally how to paint, like how to install a toilet, how to install like a P-trap. What even is a P-trap? Like all of those things, YouTube became our university. And so we got it to work, and it worked out really well. But I learned a ton. So that first one took us a year to fix. The next house took me 6 months by myself to fix. The next house after that took me 3 months, and now it's about a month and a half.
Very cool. So I like that you said that you went to YouTube to learn all these things and how to do things, because that's an amazing resource that we have in our day and age, that even if you don't get an official education through like a college or a university, or you don't go to Harvard or something, you still have the ability to learn for free.
Yeah, in fact, everything that I've done has been done through YouTube. I don't have any pity for anybody who has access to YouTube and they say they can't learn. I mean, everybody can learn anything they want on YouTube.
Well, and the other cool thing is you have access to public library.
Yeah.
So there's really no excuse not to learn if the information's out there. You just have to want to go find it and put the sweat equity, the hours to learn, and then apply it.
And it's really hard to exercise that discipline so for me, I started a habit of waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Every morning when I quit my job, because I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to work on myself. So I'd wake up at 5, and I would spend time first I'd meditate, but then I would just spend a bunch of time researching and developing that skill set and learning how to invest, learning all the terms in real estate. I had no idea that there were certain terms in real estate. I didn't know what they were. And so I YouTube the crap out of those. I started reading books. But there's so many resources. There's an infinite number of resources, honestly, for somebody who wants to get into anything like this.
Well, and I think it applies to more than just this too. I mean, if you want to learn how to do construction, there's that. If you want to learn how to do machining, there's that. There's you can build your own forge and start to learn how to do metallurgy. You can do woodworking. You can learn how to do what do they call them, mandalas. anything and everything you can think of under the sun has some kind of reference on YouTube for education.
I mean, for right now, I mean, and we don't need to talk about this too much, but for right now, I've started another company, a baby bottle, a stainless steel all-in-one insulated baby bottle. I've never done production before. I've never done a product company before, but YouTube has, and thousands of people on YouTube have, and they're willing and they're able, and they have provided so many resources of this is how you start from zero and grow it. It's like, okay, well, I'm at zero, so how do I grow it?
Yeah, exactly. So it boils down to what are the questions you need to ask. And I think a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And so the most important thing is to move forward and try to figure it out. And
Absolutely.
then it gives you the direction as you encounter problems to say, okay, well, where's my next question?
Yeah, I think for me, the best analogy that I've come up with is whenever I start a business, this was the same case in real estate, it's the same case with the Jilly bottle. It's as if I'm a little town mouse and I've been introduced to this cathedral or this castle and it's pitch black. And I've got my little candle and I can either stay still and I don't explore anything, and I don't gain anything with that cathedral or castle, or I can just start moving. And I might run into a wall, but I know that there's a wall there. Okay, so now I turn, pivot, and now I make, my next effort. And eventually I'm going to figure out all the hallways and all the rooms and everything there is to do with whatever business I'm trying to start. But that's how I've done it. And YouTube has been really instrumental in all of that.
I really like that analogy because a candle, it gives light, but there's only so much circumference of how much it gives,
Oh yeah.
right? And so you can see a little bit in front of you, but you can't see the whole picture. But that's what you have to work with. And as you explore,
and you have to walk. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to move forward. No, that's really cool. I also like that you mentioned that you needed to work on yourself. I've been getting business coaching, and the thing that's repeated often from the mentors that I listen to and learn from is that you'll never make more money than your personal development allows. So, like, you have to be able to have the skills to be valued by the marketplace. And unless you are working on that kind of development, the market doesn't care. It's an impartial judge.
Well, it's funny you say that because, going back to Fife Ventures and when I started, I did a lot of those first few flips by myself. But throughout all of that, I was developing myself, and there are certain things that I was doing to introduce myself to other people, which is a process of developing yourself. And in that journey, like you were saying, opportunities start to come to you, which is what started happening. I started having people. I don't have any friends with money. Well, I didn't, but now I have people that have started coming to me because, personal development attracts personal development. And so you've got these people that have gone places in life, and they get to meet a kindred spirit, and it's like, hey, I want to help you. How do I jump on? And it's like, well, I need some money. Great, here's some money. If you can give me this much of a return, yeah. So that's how it went for me.
Very cool. Well, it's like this idea that people don't care until you win, but once you start to win, then they want to participate.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so I had to make those first wins myself. But then people would ask, what do you do for a living? And it was like, well, I mean, in the meantime, I had started and failed 2 other companies. And it was like, well, I guess I flip houses. This is the only thing that I know how to do to put food on the table. So I guess I flip houses, And they're like, well, how many have you flipped? Have you made money? It's like, yeah, I made money. How much money could you make me if I gave you $100,000? It's like, well, I could probably make you 120 in a year. And they're like, okay, here's 100 grand.
Let's do it.
I trust you. You're a person with integrity. I mean, you've worked on yourself enough to where I can trust you. Yeah, let's get this thing rolling. And so that's how it started for me.
Very cool. It's hard to articulate some of those things because I believe there are things in life that you have to learn personally. Despite other people's best efforts to impart the knowledge, there are certain perspectives that you can only gain from your own personal experience.
Yep.
And I've gone through a couple of those, and I think the drive to start into entrepreneurship and work on personal development ultimately is a fruit of some of those lessons that I experienced in my own life.
Sure. Yeah. And those lessons can be painful, or they can also be really positive. And you learn that I don't want that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's definitely been that where, I mean, I worked my W-2 job, and that was a lesson for me in learning that I don't want that. And that's for a lot of people is what they want, and that's wonderful. But for me, going into my W-2 job, I knew, I mean, ever since I was 14 years old working at Miller's Bakery or changing, Shane Rasmussen's pipe when I was 12, it was like, I don't want to be an employee. I want to work for myself. And but that's a lesson that for me was hard that I stuck with for 15 years, you know,
Well, a
until
lot
I
of
was able
people
to
tell
break.
you what the correct course of action is, and you trust people, right?
Hmm.
That tell you to do things a certain way.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because when I was a young grasshopper back in the day, I would pay other kids to do my chores for me with my the allowance that I get for doing my chores. And when my mom found out about that, she put a stop to it because I needed to do the work myself to build character,
Well,
right?
wait, time out. So it was like, hey, we'll give you $5 to sweep the driveway, and you'd go to some Joe Schmo down the road and be like, hey, I'll give you $4 to sweep the
Yeah.
driveway.
Like basically,
That
it was
is
like do the
brilliant.
dishes for me or do
Oh, that's
like
Tom
feed
Sawyer.
the
That's
animals.
brilliant.
And when my mom put a stop to it, my sister was upset too because she was making money off of me paying her to do my chores. But what I was doing is I was buying back my time because I valued it more than the
Yeah,
work that I had to do. It was just busy work to me. And I wish that I would have recognized that as the entrepreneurial spirit when I was younger,
that's
because
brilliant.
maybe I could have applied it differently throughout
Hmm.
portions of my life. But looking back at it, it's like, dang, even when I was little, I was trying to figure out ways to be more efficient.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, that's a business. Well, if you're the business owner, you found somebody to pay you X amount of dollars, and as the business owner, you have an employee who is willing to provide that service for X minus Y.
Uh-huh.
And then whatever's left over is yours. And that's brilliant. That's great. You were more
So
of an entrepreneur than I was.
yeah, it's good stuff. The very first thing that I did when I was a kid was I was like 6 or 7, maybe 8 years, somewhere around that age. I was still being homeschooled at the time, but I got my hands on a
Uh,
sales catalog. And I went
mm.
around town selling things out of this sales catalog. I wasn't a very good salesman. I was just a cute little boy. And so,
But you were knocking doors. That's
yeah, I was
impressive.
knocking doors. I was talking to little old ladies, getting $5 bills from them because I was this cute kid asking for money. And I got my
Oh,
first
that's
bicycle that
awesome.
way.
Really?
I did. Yep.
Wow, Nathaniel, that is really cool.
It was fun.
That's neat.
And then
Yeah.
I started hitting puberty, and I ended up being a gangly, kind of odd-looking duck. And then I didn't have the
As we
cute
all are.
factor on my side anymore.
And people
Like,
were
man,
telling you to
this
get
is actually
lost.
hard. I was like, I
Yeah.
was riding on that cute factor of being a little kid.
That's funny. For me, I was this door-to-door salesman, and I stuttered. I don't know if you remember, but I stuttered a little bit in high school. I stuttered a lot in elementary school. And when I was knocking doors, because I was so nervous, I stuttered a lot. And man, people had no mercy.
Yeah.
They ripped into me. They'd be like, blankety blank, 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 you can't even talk right. Get off my porch. And I was like, oh man,
I'm
like,
not
this is really
panhandling. I'm like
hard.
trying to make a
Yeah.
living here.
Yeah, but you just have to push through that. It's hard, but it's like it's those uncomfortable moments that give you like the moxie within yourself to be like, I can handle a tough thing. Like if someone says this is tough, cool. I've done tough.
Yeah.
You know, starting a business is tough, no problem.
Well, and
Anyway,
I served a mission for the LDS Church myself, knocking doors for that, right?
that's
Trying
hard.
to, yeah. Well, there was a time in my mission where it got hard enough where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I remember I just sat down in the middle of the sidewalk one day because I'm giving up, right?
Yeah,
I sat there for about
I've
10
had enough.
minutes and I was like, darn it, this is really boring just sitting here on the side of the road. let's get back up and get to it, I guess, because
I
this
guess
was
I'll knock
worse
another
than it
door.
was. Like it was worse
Uh,
sitting there, sitting still, feeling sorry for myself than it was to just get
yeah.
up and do the work.
Well, that's a great analogy for just entrepreneurship. I mean, you can, yeah, it's easy to do nothing, but it's also the hardest thing you'll ever do. Because I think all of us within ourselves feel like this desire and this urge to become better and to become more and to grow and to expand. And that's a really painful feeling to subdue,
Yeah,
and to be like, to shut those feelings down and to, I guess, suck on the lollipop of mediocrity, if that makes sense. To just kind of be like, well, I'm just going to get enough money to provide for my family and that's it. It's like, well,
yeah.
for a lot of people, that's hard to. It's hard to swallow.
Well,
So
and I've heard the expression that your confidence comes from keeping the promises you make to yourself in private. And
yeah.
so the moment you stop keeping the promises you make to yourself in private, then you start to feel pain because you know you're not in alignment with what you could be.
hmm There also has to be an element of forgiveness and of commitment to try again with all of that. Because I mean, I've made that commitment to myself to wake up at 5 and to, meditate, read my scriptures, and then bust my butt for an hour and a half before the kids wake up to read, all those things. But there have been so many days where I've not done that. And I could either beat myself up and be like, man, yeah, you shouldn't even, you're worthless. You're pathetic for even trying to do this consistently, or it could be like, yeah, okay, this morning I slept in, tomorrow morning I'll get it, and I have to go through that exercise. I mean, at times, a few times a week, because
Constantly.
every time. Yep.
Well, both of us grew up in the LDS faith. I'm active again.
Yep.
For a time, I wasn't.
hmm
And for a very long time, Nathaniel was a bully to Nathaniel
Oh
because
yeah.
he didn't reach these expectations that he'd set for himself that were probably kind of unreasonable,
hmm
perfection kind of a thing,
Yeah.
And this is one of those lessons that I had to learn for myself was that shame is not a motive force. It's a paralyzing force.
Oh yeah. I love it.
It prevents you from taking action. And
Yeah.
so there does have to be some element of self-forgiveness and grace for yourself. Otherwise, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And when you're
Yep.
stuck, that pain that we were talking about from not keeping those promises you make to yourself in private gets amplified.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think that there's a couple things that really helped me learn that lesson. First was lucking out and marrying my beautiful wife. I don't understand how that exactly happened because, like I said, I was kind of trying to avoid people,
Yeah.
but I somehow managed to connect with her.
She's
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
We had lunch
she's been
a couple
great for
months ago.
me.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
She's taught me how to treat Nathaniel like a person that Nathaniel needs to take care of,
Mhm.
and that's been a big
Good.
thing. The second thing is as I was talking to a therapist, because like I had to go through post-traumatic stress syndrome from my assault when I was 18. He
hmm
told me that the definition of shame is this feeling that you do not deserve love and affection.
Yeah.
And so one of the best ways to fight shame is to forgive yourself and treat yourself as someone that deserves love and affection.
Yeah. Yep. It's funny because I think I try to go through this exercise a lot too, because you and I had a conversation about this earlier. How I'm very similar, um, uh, and I think that a lot of that comes from kind of a misunderstanding of probably for us, the family that we come from, and the religion that we're still a part of. I'm still an active member of the church, but I think as when I was younger, I misunderstood it. I always felt that there was this demand to be perfect, and perfectionism was the only standard that was acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me, that's a gross misunderstanding of what the gospel that our religion teaches, and unfortunately it's been pretty common. But to go to your point, I've had to go through the exercise of, okay, Peter, if you were talking to yourself the way you would talk to somebody else, I'm so encouraging to everybody else. I am so like uplifting, and you've got this, rah 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 rah, keep trying, you screwed up, don't worry, keep pushing. If you talk to yourself that way, how would your life be different? And it's like, my word, my life would be so different. For me, it's the exact opposite. I screw up and it's like, man, Peter, you idiot. What the heck are you thinking? Just all these terrible thoughts of like, you can't do this. You can't start a business. You think you can succeed? Most businesses fail. You're not going to be the one that
Yeah.
succeeds. You're, all these terrible things. It's like, man, I'll swear here, like, shut the hell up, because that's where you belong. Like those thoughts are not good thoughts. And so for
Yeah.
me, it's had to be like like a kind of a retraining of having that kind of thought process. So it's been really, really helpful. And that's part of those 5 a.m. wake up times where I'm by myself and I'm able to like connect with my Heavenly Father and be like, Heavenly Father, what do you think of me? How am I doing? And it's always loving. It's always kind. It's
Yeah.
always encouraging. And so, anyway.
It's funny how that works, because I went through a period of time where when I would pray to God, every one of my prayers would start with, I know I'm not a very good son. And
Oh,
that's how it would
terrible.
start, because
Yep.
I had a very poor image of myself.
Yeah.
But I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, probably around the time my son was born, that I had this realization that there's a mechanism that every single one of us uses in our daily lives that has to do with the way we watch film or read stories. And it's called suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And many times there are these stories that have elements to them that are completely unrealistic and unbelievable. Like use Harry Potter, for example. They use spells and magic. It's not something that exists in reality.
Yeah.
But we suspend our disbelief of those phenomena for the sake of the plot and the story.
Mm.
And the thing that really kind of turned things around for me was that I realized that I could take that mechanism that I already had practiced using and apply it to my disbeliefs about myself, and then start practicing positive
That's awesome.
mindset behaviors. And it took some time, and there's definitely days where I would relapse. And I think even now there's days where I relapse. But now that I've started building positive mindset patterns, my outlook has changed. And just like the entire fabric of my life feels more positive, just
Yeah.
because I refuse to be negative about it.
Yeah. And so much more will come of your life because of that.
Uh,
It's funny because I think becoming a father is such a transformative experience because, I mean, if you were to have your son come to you and say, Dad, I'm not a good son, that would, if my son were to do that, that would break my heart because that would mean to me that my son does not understand what I feel about him and his potential and his capacity. And so if we believe, and it's not just the LDS faith, but most faiths believe that there's a God and that that we're children of God or creations of a God. And if we were to have something that we loved come to us and say, I'm terrible, I mean, that's so wrong. And that's so not true. And so it's been um, for me a similar thing. It's been interesting to try to be like, okay, no, I'm Peter, and inherently there's worth in me, period. Whether I'm successful in business or not, there's worth, and there's something to fight for. And a lot of time that fighting for looks like just getting up and trying again in whatever aspect of life you're trying to get in. So,
I think that's the key, though, getting up and trying again.
yeah, yeah, you're worth it.
Oh.
Everyone is. But yeah, so and that's very much been the story of real estate. So for me, it's just getting up, trying again, and in business in general, and it's worked out really well.
Yeah, I
So
talked to another guest, I think 2 weeks ago, and he said that the cool thing about buy and hold real estate is that time heals all wounds or all mistakes.
yeah,
Because the longer you
yeah,
go with the appreciation, then it makes up for the losses that you experience.
that's a very true.
Oh.
And I have tried. So I flipped homes initially to just put food on the table, but then it as soon as I could morphed into buying and holding, and
Mm-hmm.
so and that's then morphed into apartment complexes and whatnot, which has been really helpful. But yeah, and I try to buy and hold everything that I buy now, which has been
Okay.
great.
Well, I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more about that, because I know that you started with single families.
Yeah.
How did you make the transition to multifamily? What caused that change?
Yeah, so my wife and I, from the time we got married, we always house hacked. So that was number one. So in the years that I was working at my W-2, every year we moved into a different home. So and every home was a multifamily. And so by the time I quit my job, I had three multifamily properties in Utah County. And if you're familiar with Utah County blew up during COVID. Prices skyrocketed.
Yeah, I was
And
planning on buying my house, and I was like 4 grand short of a
oh,
20% down payment. So I
oh,
understand
yeah.
exactly what happened.
Oh, that's heart wrenching. Yeah, and so I had three properties that blew up, and there's good and bad for that. So the good was that I now had a ton of equity in these properties. The bad was that I couldn't afford another property in Utah County. And at this
Mm,
time, I had been flipping homes, and I had investors that, I was still flipping single family homes or any home that I could buy. But the numbers just didn't make sense to do it here in Utah County. And so I started looking outside of Utah County. Ended up finding pockets in California, Nevada, and Texas that I was comfortable with. And I made I'm talking about like taking risks and just, with that candle moving down a hallway. I found an apartment complex in Texas that was also going to be condemned. It was vacant. It had been vacant for several years, falling apart, and I was going to buy it for $320,000. I was selling for $320,000. And I was like, no, that's a price I could afford, And at that point, I started understanding hard money lending and whatnot. And so, ended up buying this 16 unit apartment complex, 16 units for $320,000. Now that's crazy.
Yeah.
But these places, this was a dump. I mean, it was terrible. No, it'd been on the market for like a year and a half. Nobody wanted it. It was that bad. So it's not like I just walked into this thing. It was like nobody wanted it. And so, I decided to liquidate one of my properties here in Utah County. Nobody would lend on that property. No, not even a hard money lender could lend on that property. It was that bad. So I liquidated all of my funds from one of my property, all my equity, and all of the money that my wife had been continuing to save, and we had enough to buy the property. Then I sold another property here in Utah County, and the funds from that funded the rehab of those 16 units. And it only funded the rehab if I did most of the work myself. So I ended up driving down. I would spend a bunch of time in a car sleeping in Walmart parking lots because I didn't trust sleeping at the apartment complexes. It was a shady place. And I just worked my butt off, and I ended up fixing up those 16 units. I ended up finding somebody who did great work for really cheap, and so I employed him, had enough to barely get by. And then I refinanced that thing for $1.2 million and made roughly $700,000 of equity on that particular property. And that then, I was then able to take the equity in that, buy another apartment complex with another investor, another apartment complex, and it's just kind of gone from there. So
sure. Snowball and everything.
Yeah. So I've kind of liquidated most of what I have here in Utah County and those other states, and I've just kind of So right now I'm under contract to buy a 25 unit complex in Colorado.
Okay. Very cool.
That just happened this morning. So
We'll see what happens. That one as well.
Yeah. So I'll be. It's a vacant property. In fact, it was used to grow marijuana. It used to be an apartment complex that they used to just grow a bunch of weed, and I'll be remediating that thing and tearing everything down inside and rebuilding it. So the after repair value on that thing should be $3.2 million.
Very cool.
So we'll see.
See how things go, huh? Future looks bright, though.
Just onward and upward. You just got to keep grinding. And a lot of people are like, man, you're like, this is the dumbest part of real estate to be in. And it's like, well, this is the most comfortable part for me because I can count on sweat equity. I can count on work bringing value. And I mean, you have an incident like happened a couple of years ago where interest rates go up, and suddenly these properties that don't have that much value add, you're barely breaking even or you're losing money. And for me, that's scary as all get out. So sweat equity for me is the safest thing. For my investors, they love it. And so, I mean, that's what I keep doing.
No, I like that because you're kind of in what they call the zone of genius. You know exactly what you're doing. You know how to make it happen, and you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, and it's been neat because I've started to grow a very small reputation where if there's an apartment complex that nobody wants,
like, hey,
I'll get
it.
That's just literally how this one in Colorado came. Like, hey, I heard you did apartment complexes that are just absolutely terrible, trash. I'm like, yeah, I would love your trashiest apartment complex. The trashier, the better. And they're like, okay, well, we have a really trashy apartment complex. It's like, cool. I've already done a few of those.
Good, right?
Let's go under contract. So it's been interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been kind of an interesting journey. I know that you mentioned that you had back issues along the way.
Yes.
But that getting into fixing and flipping actually kind of helped with that. You want to tell me about that a little bit? Share that with the audience.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease now 6.5 years ago, and that's when I was working at my full-time job. And I was told that within 5 years I would probably have to go to Germany to get a disc replacement done on the neck because they do artificial disc replacements on your lower back and middle and mid sections, but not on your neck. At least that was the case 6.5 years ago. But at the time I needed to provide for my family. So the only thing I could do was flip homes. So I started doing that, and I was like, well, my back's just going to have to pay the price. And ironically, I used to have flare-ups where I could not get out of my bed. One time it was for about a week and a half, about a week and a half. Since I have quit my job and been flipping homes and like been manually like laboring, I have not had a single flare up, and it's been 6.5 years. My back it's better than it's ever been. It's honestly it is fascinating how that's happened. The reason why I started getting other people to do like more contractors involved with the rehabs, or because I was afraid my back would give out. But so far that hasn't happened.
It's like it
But
needs
I'm
to be
glad.
used, huh?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that I had that excuse to hire other people, because I'm very much a person that I have to do things by myself. I just have a really hard time delegating. But because I was so afraid of my back, what started it was that I started feeling my back hurting, and I was like, shoot, if my back hurts and I can't finish this project, I'm screwed. I have to hire some team, and so that
Mm.
instigated me hiring a team of contractors, and they have been phenomenal. And I've not looked back ever since. They have allowed me to flip properties so much faster, and it's been so worth it. And yeah, I mean, I'm still doing labor intensive things, but I don't depend on it to put food on the table, which is very nice. So yeah, so it's been a pretty crazy ride.
Well, and now you get to keep up with your boys too, right? You got 4 sons.
Yeah, yeah, and the cool thing about this whole journey is that, because the way that I've done it, I take investors, I take their funds, I buy a property, I rehab the property, and then in our agreements, it's upon refinance, um, the property becomes 100% mine, and I pay off the investors the numbers that they're wanting, but then the property is 100% mine, and so what that's done, or I guess what that's allowed me to do, is to get a good amount of passive income from those properties, and that's allowed me to. I mean, if I were to die today, my wife and my kids would be able to have um, the means necessary to have a good life, nothing crazy or exorbitant, but a good life. And the flip side of that is that I'm not dead, and so that's now allowed me to spend more time with my family and start other businesses on the side, which has been just awesome. Loved it.
Sounds really fulfilling too.
Oh yeah, it's been great. And if you had told me 6 years ago that this is how it would have turned out, I would have thought you were crazy. Honestly, because I had no idea what I was doing. 6 years ago I had not installed the toilet. And it's like you're gonna have a very small investment company, but it's gonna be making enough for you to provide for your family and allow you to do other businesses. I'd be like, bull crap. Like there is no way. And
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
yeah, you just like we were saying, you just have to keep moving and figure out what works for you, and then drive on. So
And we all have a lot of potential. I don't know if you've read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill,
love it. Hmm.
but there's a section in that book where he talks about how scientists have um, basically looked at the brain and determined that the number of interconnections, so not separate cells, but the number of connections between the cells, exceeds the number of, I think they said 27 followed by 15 million zeros, which is more than the known numbers of atoms in the Milky Way galaxy.
What? Really?
And that's how many interconnections are inside every single human brain. And so the
Wow.
potential that we have, I think, is something that's very hard for us to determine ourselves. And I like the way my mom describes it. She says, if our brains were simple enough for us to understand them, we would be too simple to understand them.
That's great. I love it. I remember watching a movie. I had no idea what the movie was. I don't even remember what it was about. It had something to do with the brain when I was like 12 years old. And in that movie, they had said that like only 13 or 15, some small number percent of the brain is utilized, is actually used. And I remember thinking, and I just read this thing about Albert Einstein like the day before, and thinking, holy cow, like you mean Albert Einstein only accessed, maybe tapped into 20% of his brain? Like what's the other 80% capable of? And so
Mhm.
ever since I saw that, I was like, man, I could do way more. I don't know what I can do, but I can tell you right now, it's a lot more than I'm doing right now. So I'm on
Well,
this
I don't think
quest to
we
figure that
really
out.
understand the upper limits of our
Mhm.
capacity. And I think it's a
Yeah.
journey of discovery that's going to last the entirety of our lives.
Oh, sure. Yep. And for me, it's like this voracious hunger of like trying to figure out, well, what am I capable of doing?
Yeah.
And if I fail at something, it's like, okay, well, I'm not capable of that yet, but
I like
eventually I
that
will.
word. I like that word
Yeah,
yet. I
yeah,
can't do that
yeah,
yet, but that doesn't mean I won't be able to do it forever.
yeah. It means that there are other lessons I need to learn beforehand before I can succeed at this.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, then let's figure out what those lessons are and 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 move.
I like that
So
you bring that up because that's a big part of my why for being an entrepreneur is just this curiosity. What am I capable of?
yeah,
It's like maybe I don't ever make $1 million. Maybe I don't ever make businesses that impact the world, but how do
so
I
what?
know until
Yeah,
I go out
yeah.
there and try?
And like
How do I know?
and there was a book or podcast that I read too. And again, all this comes from those personal development moments at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is why it's so it just expands your way of thinking. Somebody had said like they had done like a bunch of interviews. There was a book done about a bunch of interviews done to people that were on their deathbeds in the hospital. And the questions were, what are your biggest regrets? And that made me think so much about like, man, fast forward the clock 70 years from now, 60 years from now. And I mean, certainly I want to have time with my family. I want to be able to be a loving father and husband. But then after that, it's like, I want to make a difference in the community. Like, I would hate to be told, Peter, the person you could have become, if you had worked on yourself and been diligent for the last 60 years, this is the person you could have become. You could have changed this many lives. You could have transformed this many communities. And then to be like, well, shoot, I was just kind of a bum in my house playing video games. And that's all that I did. I transformed a lot of video games, but no one cares. And it's like, all right, forget Skyrim, forget all those other things. I'm working on myself, and that for me was just such a driver of like, I don't want that regret. I don't want that regret at all. I would love to be on my deathbed and be like, dude, I crushed it. Did I
Yeah,
do
I put
everything that
in
I
my
could have
effort.
done? No, but man, I did everything that I worked my butt off, and
Yeah,
and that was awesome. So
yeah,
that's what I
I
want.
hear that. I definitely hear that. It's interesting you mentioned Skyrim. I played World of Warcraft for a very long time, but there
Yeah,
got to a point where I felt this itch that I wasn't doing as much as I was capable of. And it started to get so intense that I couldn't find any enjoyment from playing the
yeah,
game anymore,
yeah.
which is kind of an interesting phenomena. Made me think of how lobsters they grow and their shells get to be too small for their bodies, and they
Interesting. I didn't know
become
that.
very uncomfortable, and so they have to go hide under a rock and then shed their old shell, and then
Huh?
they're soft and they're vulnerable for a time until their new shell hardens again, and then the process repeats as they
Really?
continue to grow. And I just felt like that was kind of what was going on because I'd reached this point of I need to grow again. What do I need to cast off of my old life to be able to make this growth happen?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love that. You have to shed who you are. For me, the moment came when I was trying to start my own business. My wife was working. I was at home with I was a stay-at-home dad for the first year of my child's life as I was trying to start different businesses. But when I had nothing to do, I was playing Skyrim.
Mm.
And I remember watching my son Simon. He's this little bouncer there, and at times he would just like stare at me. I'm sitting there playing Skyrim, and I just kept looking. I was like, "What the heck am I doing?" Like what am I doing? Like this is my son. I've committed to provide for him, to get him the best possibility in life. And am I thinking that playing this game, like I might not have anything to do? That's bullcrap. There's always something to do.
Yeah.
There's always books to read. There's always videos to like watch to educate yourself on. And so that for me was like such a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, and I deleted the game right there. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was like, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know I shouldn't be doing these things. And
Well,
and, and I can start with that.
yeah.
So
No, I like that. It's interesting you say that because I kind of had a similar realization. A typical video game costs like $50 to $60 or something, right?
sure, sure.
How many hours do you put into that game?
Oh, so
I
much.
mean, for the typical gamer that does gaming for like their pastime and their hobby, it's easily 800 to 1,000 hours per game.
Man,
Like
man.
that's really how it is. And I
Yeah.
thought about it and I was like, well, okay, if I make $10 an hour and I put 800 hours into this game where I could have been making
Whoa.
$10 an hour, this game
Yeah.
cost me $8,000.
Wow.
And I was like,
Wow.
well, that puts things into more of a perspective.
It's actually more than that, because what if you spend 800 hours developing yourself,
Yeah, yeah.
increasing your hourly wage to
So,
20, $30 an hour? It's
and all I'm
like, and
doing
yeah,
otherwise is entertaining myself. I'm numbing my brain instead of facing the problems that are confronting me in my life.
yeah. If you're like me, it's uncomfortable to face those problems,
Oh,
and so it's just this incredible numbing agent. TikTok is, Facebook, Instagram, all of these things are, and it's like, they can be used for good. Yes. Are they oftentimes used to numb ourselves, or for us to escape reality, or for us to just waste time? For me, 97% of the time is what
yeah.
it is what they're used for. It's like, okay, I need to, I got to work on this. So
Well, Karl Marx said that he believes that religion was the opium of the masses. It sedated
mhm.
them, prevented them from being able to think. But I think the phenomena of our
Yeah,
day and age is actually entertainment.
the screen.
Entertainment is the
Yeah,
opium of the masses. We're
yep,
all
the
so
screen.
busy trying not to be bored that we're not being productive. We're just being consumers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
And the
I'm not
ones, the
like
ones that
coming
recognize
down on
that,
anybody because of that. Like I understand
no,
where you're at. Like I used escapism for a long time to get away from
yeah,
things that I didn't want to experience.
we've all been there. Yeah.
But there's a saying that says good is the enemy of best.
Mm.
And so even if it's a good thing or it's not a bad thing, it's not the best thing, and you could be productive and find meaning. If you can find something that does both of those things for you, then you can make money and still enjoy your life.
Well, and the measure in which you're able to recognize that within yourself and make the necessary changes is the measure in which you will be able to expand yourself.
You know,
I'm ultimately doing those things. For me, I just saw was a self-shrinking exercise, and the measure in which I was able to turn away from that and try to develop myself in those uncomfortable areas, um, was a very much a soul expanding experience, and the capacity that I've had then to make money, to make differences in my family's life, and people around me. It's been so much better, so much bigger. So yeah, we've all been there. I mean, those video games they're
yeah,
fun,
they are
super
fun.
fun.
I like them. I like things
Oh
like fiction stories like Lord of the Rings and
yeah,
Harry Potter and Star
oh my
Wars and all
word.
these things. But there's a season
But
for
there's a
everything.
time and a place for that. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a time and a
there's
place. It's
yeah,
They're not bad to play, but they become harmful if they get out of control. And I think all of us deep down know what out of control is.
yeah, that's true.
And
Like I know
yeah,
that if I spend 8 hours on this thing when I should have been doing something else and getting something done, well then it comes back to that confidence eating thing of where you're not keeping the promises to yourself, like we
and
talked
that
about.
makes you feel uncomfortable. And then because you feel uncomfortable, you're gonna numb yourself by playing more video games. And
The
it's like,
vicious
oh,
cycle, right?
stop that. You've got to stop
Yeah,
it. Yeah. Forgive yourself, move on, and try again
like
the next minute, the
what's
next hour,
that?
the next day.
That Scottish guy from Austin Powers is like I depressed because I eat and I eat because I'm depressed. It's a vicious
Yeah.
cycle.
Oh my gosh, every form of addiction. I don't care what addiction it is,
Yeah.
it's gonna be that way. So yeah, yep,
No,
totally.
it's really good. I like that. You know,
I have not played Skyrim in 5 years, and in those 5 years, I have been able to provide. Essentially, I've been able to retire.
very cool.
So the
Wow.
opportunity cost of
Think
Skyrim
about
for
that.
me,
Like,
yes. So the
even if
opportunity
you
of
just
Skyrim,
took 5 years, wrote off video games for 5 years, got to a place where you can retire, and then you can play video games
yeah,
again.
sure,
Like,
yeah. So like literally, if you were to compare my life to what it could have been if it was a W-2 employee playing Skyrim, the opportunity cost of Skyrim was 30 years of employment, working
wow,
8 hours a day.
thinking about it that way. Crazy.
And so for me, I don't hate Skyrim. I
Yeah.
freaking love Skyrim, but it has to be a recognition within myself of there's a time and a place for this.
There's opportunity costs. Like I
Yeah.
said, that $8,000 that I was talking about for 800 hours worth of game
Yeah.
time. And that's just measuring it by like how many
Exactly.
hourly wage kind of hours you could make off of
That's
it.
not measuring like the exponential growth that you have by developing yourself and then growing yourself in that whole process. So it's been, I don't know. I think for me, yeah. I mean, when I think of it that way, it's kind of like, man, stay away from me, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I haven't
Wild.
played in 5 years.
I think there are some lessons that I still pulled from it when I was playing, because I had
Sure.
a social connection there. I also learned, honestly, a lot about money from World of Warcraft
Oh
because
yeah.
for the last couple of years that I played, I didn't really play the game to do like battles against monsters or anything like that.
Sure.
It was all about trying to learn how to earn the gold in the in-game currency.
Yeah.
And using the auction house and the different crafting and production methods that they had in the game, I spent a good 80 something million gold just playing this monetary game
Yeah.
that I learned how to bring in net something like 13 to 14 million after everything.
Wow.
It's actually closer
Yeah.
to 20, 23, 24 because I did spend something like 10
That's a
million
great
on
lesson.
toys, right?
But
But
that's a great lesson on like maximizing. It takes money to make money,
yeah,
and
yeah,
for me, it was Age of Empires. It was all just like, how do I maximize my economies?
it's
and
interesting.
and when and when do I maximize them? Like when do I need X resource? Am I gathering it too soon? And the same thing is the same with real estate, where it's like, if I were to have jumped into apartment complexes prematurely, I would have been screwed.
Uh,
But because I was able to build up my smaller multifamily portfolio, I had enough equity so that when the time came to flip this property and no one would fund me, that's okay. I had enough equity in other properties to then shift to this bigger deal and
give you
maximize
options.
that. Yeah, and so yeah, there's wonderful things to be learned in those things.
Yeah,
And yeah, so for me, it was definitely Age of Empires, another video game. But
yeah.
yeah,
So, but like we said, moderation and knowing
oh yeah,
how to allocate your resources and like time and energy is a resource too. And
absolutely.
so,
Hmm.
uh, very interesting to think about. But
I mean,
well,
one
you
more thing, because
mentioned
I know
YouTube as a
we're
resource for people.
yeah.
Do you have any like recommendations for books or other resources for people to learn more about real estate?
Yeah, I think for me, and I get asked this question very frequently. Um, I would just read the books that I read when I first started doing it. With the Millionaire Real Estate Investor by, I can't remember his name anymore. Gary something. He owns Keller Williams. That for me it gave me the vision of a long-term vision that real estate is. That is a
Okay.
fantastic book to help someone understand numbers that go into real estate.
In the
Like the
long-term vision.
overview, yeah, not like the very tedious numbers, but like the overview of like, man, if I stick with this strategy, come hell or high water, in the long run, this is going to be a great strategy for me and really, really safe. So that's a really good one. Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki
Robert
has
Kiyosaki.
was fantastic way of trying to think of like, okay, how am I using my resources? I'm really good at doing it in video games, but how am I doing it in real life?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, when it comes time to grow and expand your business, the cash flow quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, same thing. But the difference between a W-2 employee, a business owner, an investor, and a self-employed person, and that for me was very transformative in my thinking of, okay, how do I up my game to maximize. Anyways, those are good ones. Another good one is The Millionaire Next Door. That is just a fantastic book to read when it comes to spending habits. Most millionaires don't drive nice cars. Most millionaires don't have nice suits. I mean, in all transparency, I'm a millionaire, and people ask me. They say, "Hey, let's go to lunch." And one of my favorite things to do is to go to lunch, and I show up in my 2005, or right now, because that one died. I just bought a 1995 Lexus ES300 with bad paint, and here's somebody working, getting paid, $100,000 a year, but they're barely making ends meet, and they pull up in a nice Audi, and we have our lunch. We talk about everything that I've done, strategy and whatnot, and I've not done anything compared to a lot of other people, but in my mind, it's been awesome. And and then we walk out to our cars, and it is so fascinating the reaction that I get after I talk about my strategies of living frugally, of investing very, feverishly. My wife and I still live off of very little, but we invest everything we make. And then I step into the car, And always the reaction 100% of the time is, dang, so that's how you did it. Meaning like you're not BSing me. Like you really did sacrifice. It is hard to go to family functions and everyone's pulling up in Teslas and F-250s, and I pull up in my ES300 1995 or old minivan. But in my mind it's like I'm in this for the long game. Eventually I'll be able to buy hundreds of Teslas, if not thousands of Teslas. But not right now. Now's the time for growth. Now's the time for investing. So anyway, Millionaire Next Door got me into that mindset.
Millionaire Next Door. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that, I say 5 or 6 years ago, and it kind of got me thinking, like it started changing my mindset a little bit. But the funny thing is I could not wrap my head around this idea of good debt.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't either.
Like I sat and
scared the crap
struggled
out of
with
me.
that for a good year and a half. Like I don't understand. Debt is bad. How is he framing this to make it look good? And it didn't click until I looked out across the Salt Lake Valley coming home from my sister's house one day. And there's houses from one mountain range all the way over to the other side. And I'm like, those houses all represent wealth. Each one of those houses is worth $250,000 to a couple $1 million. And it's all right there in front of me, and I can see it. It's so abundant.
Yep. And they've all been leveraged. I
never saw it before. I was like,
yeah. Yeah, for me, it was the same thing. It was the exact same thing where it was like I was scared to death of debt. Now I'm millions of dollars in debt. But I'm, a little bit more millions ahead of it, and it's like, okay, that's my net worth.
Well, and you got the skills and the resources to know how to manage it too.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about debt is that if you handle debt appropriately, I've never missed a payment in credit cards. Rule number one. But I've also never, ever, ever done anything to even make any of my lenders question my ability to pay the debts. Everything that I've promised to do, I've done. And when you handle debt, that can be the biggest asset in your business, because then you go to lenders and you say, hey, here's my track record. I've done X number of properties. Reach out to all my other lenders, or you go back to the same lender and be like, look, you and I have done lots of deals together. You know who I am. I've got this track record with you. How much can I get lended? I mean, I have a buddy who has now done a few homes in really high-end neighborhoods for $3 to $5 million. And he just went, he had a meeting with his bank, and the bank was like, look, you can have carte blanche. You can have whatever you want up to $15 million. Why? Because the guy is consistent and he's solid. And so he's like, man, Peter, I just broke through the ceiling. I'm now at 15 million. I used to be at 3, used to be at 5. Now I'm at 15. He's like, I can make out of that $15 million, I think I could probably make 25. And that's huge. That's $10 million we're talking about.
Wow.
All because of a wise use of leverage. And so, I mean, never take on debt that you can't handle. But if you take on debt that you can handle it, but then leverage the fact that you handled it the next time and be like, look, I've got an A record.
I got a track record.
Of all the people you want to lend to, it's me. And so it's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, well, what do we need to do to lend to you?
Well, part of that's because they know that if they lend to you, they will make money.
Oh yeah, because
so that's why there's the whole credit rating system, is because if you are likely not to pay someone back, well, then you're a loss. But if you're making money with that money and they're benefiting from it, they'll give you money all day long because you're going to go out and make it for them.
Well, what's funny is that when I started, banks would not lend to me. And so I had to go to investors, and I had to find some way to assure investors that it was like, look, banks won't lend to me, but I promise you, I'll give you the number you give me, like X dollars plus Y. And at that point, it comes up to your personal development and being a great person that they can trust. And then people are like, yeah, I just had someone shell out $500,000. And it's like, I will sell my home and put my family on the street before
I don't pay him back.
Before I don't pay him back. And I assure him that. And it's like, I will do that. And my wife is aware of that. My kids are aware of that. And so it's like, it's important for daddy to make ends meet. And so, but yeah, now that I have investors, now banks are like, hey, well, we'll lend to you. And so anyway, it's just kind of a cycle that's hard to get into, but it's easier to get into if you're consistent, honest, and a hard worker.
Interesting.
So
I've really enjoyed our talk today, Peter.
Oh yeah.
Do you have anything you might like to share with the listeners as recommendations for people getting started that we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I just listened to. There's lots of podcasts you can listen to. Bigger Pockets podcast is going to listen to. This Pot of Gold, that's great. What you have going on here is fantastic. Listen to podcasts. avail yourself of the resources of YouTube, books. I don't know. Nothing comes easy. It's a lot of work, but the dividends are just awesome. So
Go out and
keep
get
at
it.
it. Keep trying. Yeah, go out and get it. Keep trying. It'll
Cool.
happen.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. This has been the Pot of Gold podcast, where we talk about finances, wealth generation, and real estate investing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathaniel.